Penelope Ainsworth had always been the kind of girl who felt more at ease in the background than front and center. She was slender, but strong, with kind, hazel eyes framed by round spectacles and a soft manner that kept her from truly standing out in any group. When her parents transferred her to Blackwood Academy halfway through 11th grade, she only hoped to go unnoticed, finish her studies peacefully, and head off to art school. She never imagined she'd become the main target of the school's worst tormentors so quickly. The problems began one Wednesday afternoon in the art studio. Penelope had just settled in with her palette of watercolors and a mug of chamomile tea when Brianna Sterling and her followers swarmed her like hornets. Brianna was everything Penelope wasn't: muscular, loud, and brimming with the confidence that came from never facing any real hardship. Her two closest friends, Chloe Davies and Tiffany Ellis, trailed her like guard dogs, their matching designer bags and scornful expressions completing the intimidating picture. Well, look what we have here." Brianna's voice echoed across the studio, drawing the attention of students nearby. A new canvas. Penelope kept her gaze fixed on her canvas, hoping they'd get bored and leave her alone. She had dealt with bullies before at her previous school, and she knew that confrontation only made matters worse. But Brianna wasn't the type to be ignored. "Hey, Specs, I'm talking to you." Brianna's hand crashed down on the table, making Penelope's teacup rattle. "What makes you think you can just stroll into our studio and set up shop wherever you please?" The studio had quieted down, with everyone watching the unfolding drama with the morbid curiosity of people observing an accident. Penelope finally looked up, meeting Brianna's icy green eyes. "I'm just trying to paint," Penelope said softly, her voice steady despite her racing pulse. Chloe giggled, a shrill sound that bounced off the studio walls. "Listen to her, Brianna. She's just trying to paint." She mimicked Penelope's gentle tone with exaggerated mockery. Tiffany reached over and nudged Penelope's glasses, pushing them down her nose. "Maybe she needs these things adjusted, so she can see she isn't wanted here." Penelope adjusted her glasses and stood up, intending to move rather than let the situation escalate. But Brianna wasn't done with her yet. As Penelope reached for her bag, Brianna grabbed her teacup and splashed its contents all over Penelope's pale yellow cardigan. Tea dripped down the soft yarn, staining the fabric a murky brown. The studio erupted in a mix of gasps and snickers. Penelope stood there, tea dripping from her cardigan, while Brianna and her friends exchanged high fives in celebration of their cruelty. Mr. Harrison, the art teacher, was conveniently facing the other way, deeply involved in a conversation with another student. "Oops," Brianna said with false sweetness. "Looks like you need a lesson in art etiquette, new girl." Penelope felt the familiar sting of shame in her cheeks, but she forced herself to stay calm. She had promised her grandmother, Nonna Emilia, that she would only use her self-defense skills for protection, never for vengeance or to prove a point. 10 years of rigorous Aikido training had given her more than just physical skills. It had taught her self-control, patience, and the wisdom to know when force was truly necessary. But as she walked out of the studio with tea stains marring her cardigan and the sound of laughter following her down the hallway, Penelope wondered how long her composure would last. The harassment continued all week. Brianna and her crew seemed to have made tormenting Penelope their new favorite pastime. They would bump into her in the hallways, knock her sketchbook out of her hands, and make snide remarks about her clothing whenever she walked by. In pottery class, they would deliberately throw clay at her station, then claim it was an accident when Ms. Albright looked their way. Penelope endured it all with quiet grace, cleaning up the messes they made of her belongings and ignoring their insults. Her classmates watched with a mixture of sympathy and relief that they weren't the ones being targeted. Some even seemed to enjoy the spectacle, gossiping and pointing whenever Brianna's crew pulled another stunt. The worst incident happened on a Friday afternoon near the bicycle racks. Penelope was heading towards the bike lane when Brianna, Chloe, and Tiffany cornered her between two parked cars. This time, there were no teachers around, no witnesses, except for a few students who quickly scattered when they saw what was about to happen. "Going somewhere, loser!" Brianna shoved Penelope hard, sending her stumbling backward into a car. "You know, I've been thinking. Maybe you need to learn your place around here." Penelope straightened up, her sketchbook clutched tightly in her hands. "I don't want any trouble, Brianna." "Too bad," Tiffany sneered. "Trouble found you." Chloe stepped forward and shoved Penelope again, harder this time. Penelope's head hit the car's rearview mirror, and she felt a sharp pain throb through her temple. Still, she didn't retaliate. Her training had taught her that true strength came from restraint, from choosing when to act rather than simply reacting to provocation. "What's wrong with you?" Brianna demanded, frustration creeping into her voice. "Why won't you fight back? Are you really that much of a pushover?" Penelope wiped a trickle of blood from where her head had hit the mirror. "I'm not a pushover," she said softly. "I just don't believe in unnecessary violence." The three bullies exchanged glances, then burst into laughter. "Unnecessary violence?" Chloe repeated. "Listen to this girl. She sounds like some kind of saint or something." Brianna's expression darkened. "Maybe we need to show you what necessary violence looks like." She drew back her fist, and for a moment, Penelope tensed, her body automatically shifting into a defensive posture. Years of training had made the movement instinctive, and she could see exactly how Brianna's punch would come, how easy it would be to redirect it and respond with devastating force. But at the last second, she forced herself to relax, to take the hit rather than escalate the situation. Brianna's fist connected with Penelope's cheekbone, snapping her head to the side. The metallic taste of blood filled her mouth, but she didn't strike back. She simply looked at Brianna with calm, unwavering eyes that seemed to unnerve the larger girl. "That's it?" Brianna demanded. "You're just going to stand there?" Penelope spat blood onto the pavement. "I told you I don't want to fight." The three girls exchanged confused glances. They had expected fear, tears, pleading, anything but this quiet acceptance. It was as if Penelope was operating by a completely different set of rules than they understood. Finally, Brianna stepped back, her confusion giving way to disgust. "You're pathetic," she spat. "Come on, girls, this isn't even fun anymore." As they walked away, Penelope could hear them muttering among themselves, trying to make sense of what had just happened. She touched her swollen cheek gingerly and wondered if Nonna Emilia would be proud of her restraint or disappointed in her inability to find a middle ground. That weekend, Penelope sat in her studio apartment, staring at the collection of certificates and ribbons that lined her desk. Regional competitions, national showcases, international invitations, 10 years of dedication and training represented in crisp paper and colorful fabric. Her parents thought she had given up martial arts when they moved, that she wanted a clean slate without the pressure of competition. They didn't know that she still practiced every morning before school, running through forms and techniques in the park before anyone else was awake. Nonna Emilia had always taught her that true martial arts weren't about fighting. They were about avoiding fights. But she had also taught her that there came a time when walking away was no longer an option, when standing up for yourself became a moral imperative. Penelope picked up her tablet and scrolled through social media, seeing posts from her classmates about the upcoming school gala. Several of them featured pictures of Brianna and her crew, posing and showing off for the camera. In the comments, she saw references to "that weird new girl" and Brianna's new punching bag. The humiliation burned worse than any physical pain Brianna had inflicted. Monday morning brought a new level of harassment. Brianna had apparently spent the weekend planning something special because she was waiting by Penelope's locker with a crowd of onlookers already gathered. In her hands was a poster board sign that read, "Dump tea here," in large black letters. "Hold still, loser," Brianna commanded as Chloe and Tiffany grabbed Penelope's arms. "We're going to help you make some friends." The crowd laughed as Brianna attempted to tape the sign to Penelope's back. But something had changed in Penelope over the weekend. As the tape touched her sweater, she felt something snap inside her, not anger, but a cold, clear realization that this had gone far enough. "Let go of me," Penelope said, her voice carrying a new edge that made several students take a step back. Brianna paused in her taping, surprised by the change in tone. "What did you say?" Penelope turned around slowly, and for the first time since arriving at Blackwood Academy, she looked directly into Brianna's eyes without flinching. "I said, let go of me." There was something different about the quiet girl now, a stillness that was somehow more intimidating than any amount of threats or violence. Brianna felt a shiver run down her spine, but pushed it aside. She had gone too far to back down now, especially with half the school watching. "Make me," Brianna said, shoving Penelope hard in the chest. It was exactly the wrong thing to do. Penelope moved with a speed and precision that seemed to defy logic. Brianna's shove met empty air as Penelope stepped aside gracefully, her hand shooting out to grab Brianna's wrist. Before anyone could fully register what was happening, Brianna was on the ground, her arm twisted behind her back in a lock that made her gasp with pain. 10 years, Penelope said softly, her voice carrying clearly through the suddenly silent hallway. 10 years of Aikido, including several regional medals and an international invite. I've been trying to avoid this because I was taught that fighting should be a last resort. Chloe and Tiffany started forward to help their friend, but Penelope's free hand moved in a gesture that stopped them cold. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but both girls suddenly understood that approaching her would be a very bad idea. "But you've pushed this too far," Penelope continued, applying just enough pressure to Brianna's arm to make her point without causing lasting harm. "I've tried walking away. I've tried ignoring you. I've tried being patient. None of it worked." Brianna struggled against the hold, but Penelope's technique was flawless. The more Brianna fought, the more uncomfortable the position became. Students were pulling out their phones, recording the shocking turn of events. "So here's what's going to happen," Penelope said, her voice calm and collected. "You're going to leave me alone. You're going to stop harassing other students who can't defend themselves, and if you ever lay a hand on me again, I won't be nearly as gentle as I'm being right now." To emphasize her point, Penelope shifted her grip slightly, and Brianna cried out in pain. The sound echoed through the hallway like a gunshot, and several students gasped. "Do we understand each other?" Penelope asked. "Yes," Brianna gasped. "Yes, okay, I get it." Penelope released her and stepped back, but her posture remained alert and ready. Brianna scrambled to her feet, her face red with shame and her arms still throbbing from the hold. Around them, students stared in shock at the transformation of the quiet new girl into someone who clearly knew how to handle herself. "This isn't over," Brianna said, trying to salvage some pride from the situation. Penelope tilted her head slightly, and there was something almost predatory in the movement. "Are you sure you want it to continue?" For the first time since Penelope had arrived at Blackwood Academy, Brianna felt genuinely frightened. There was something in the other girl's eyes, not anger or hatred, but a cold competence that suggested she could back up any threat she made. Brianna looked around at the crowd of students, all of whom were staring at her with a mixture of disbelief and amusement. Her reputation as the school's queen bee was crumbling before her eyes. "Whatever," Brianna muttered, pushing through the crowd with Chloe and Tiffany trailing behind her like defeated pets. The hallway remained silent for a long moment after they left. Then, slowly, students began to disperse, whispering excitedly among themselves about what they had just witnessed. Penelope gathered her books from her locker, her movements calm and deliberate despite the adrenaline surging through her veins. "Dude, that was amazing," a voice said behind her. Penelope turned to see Leo Romano, a younger student who had been one of Brianna's previous targets. "Where did you learn to do that?" Penelope closed her locker and slung her bag over her shoulder. 10 years of training," she said simply, "and 10 years of learning when not to use it." As she walked to her first class, Penelope could feel the stares following her. But they were different now. No longer looks of sympathy or amusement, but of respect and maybe a little fear. Word spread quickly through the school's group chats, and by lunchtime, everyone knew that the quiet new girl had single-handedly humiliated Brianna Sterling and her crew. The rest of the week passed without incident. Brianna and her friends gave Penelope a wide berth, and the other students treated her with a new level of respect. Teachers who had previously ignored the bullying now nodded approvingly when they saw her in the halls. Even the popular kids, who had never acknowledged her existence before, began including her in conversations. But Penelope wasn't interested in becoming the new queen of the school hierarchy. She had learned from Nonna Emilia that true strength came not from dominating others, but from protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. When she saw Brianna's crew starting to pick on a younger student named Olivia Chen, Penelope intervened with a simple glance that sent them scurrying away. When a group of girls were being harassed by some older boys, Penelope appeared beside them with that same calm presence that had so effectively dealt with Brianna. On Friday afternoon, as Penelope was leaving school, she found Brianna waiting by the bike racks. For a moment, Penelope tensed, ready for another confrontation. But Brianna's posture was different now, defeated, almost apologetic. "Hey," Brianna said quietly, avoiding Penelope's gaze. "Can we talk?" Penelope studied her for a moment, then nodded. "What's on your mind?" Brianna scuffed at a pebble with her shoe, her usual confidence completely gone. "I wanted to say sorry," she said finally, "for all the stuff I did to you. It wasn't right." Penelope waited patiently for her to continue. "I've been thinking about what you said," Brianna went on, "about how I should stop harassing other students who can't defend themselves. And you're right, I've been a real bully to a lot of people." "What made you change your mind?" Penelope asked. Brianna looked up at her, and Penelope could see genuine regret in her eyes. "My little brother got picked on at his school last year. It really messed him up, and I was so angry at the kids who did it to him. But then I realized I was doing the same thing to other people. I was being exactly the kind of person I hated." Penelope nodded slowly. "It takes courage to admit when you're wrong." "I know I can't just apologize and make everything okay," Brianna continued. "But I want you to know that I'm going to try to be better, and if you ever see me slipping back into old habits, call me out on it." Penelope extended her hand, and after a moment of hesitation, Brianna shook it. "Everyone deserves a second chance," Penelope said. "Just don't make me regret giving you one." As Brianna walked away, Penelope reflected on the week's events. She had spent so long trying to avoid conflict that she had forgotten one of Nonna Emilia's most important lessons. Sometimes the only way to achieve peace is to be prepared for war. She hadn't wanted to fight, but when fighting became necessary, she had been ready. The following Monday, Penelope walked into school with her head held high. Students greeted her in the hallways, and teachers smiled when they saw her. But more importantly, she noticed that the atmosphere of the school had changed. Without Brianna's crew terrorizing other students, a sense of safety had returned to Blackwood Academy. Students who had been targets before were now walking with assurance, participating in class discussions, and generally seeming happier. Penelope had learned that true strength wasn't about dominating others or proving how tough you were. It was about standing up for what was right, protecting those who needed protection, and knowing when to show restraint and when to take action. She had tried to avoid conflict, but when conflict became unavoidable, she had handled it with the same discipline and control that Nonna Emilia had taught her. As she sat in her first period literature class, listening to Mr. Davies discuss the themes of justice and forgiveness in literature, Penelope smiled to herself. She had found her place at Blackwood Academy, not as a victim or a bully, but as someone who stood up for others and used her strength responsibly. It was exactly what Nonna Emilia would have wanted, and exactly what Penelope had needed to learn about herself. The quiet girl had found her power, and it spoke volumes. 18052 characters.